Sometimes a man's last $15 can buy more than just a barn. It can buy a second chance at life. When Levi Cooper handed over his final bills for an abandoned barn on the edge of a forgotten town, he wasn't looking for miracles, just peace and escape from his past. But when he pushed open that weathered door, he found something waiting, a weary, half-starved donkey standing there as if it had been expecting him. No brand, no owner, no explanation. What Levi couldn't know was that this barn and mysterious donkey would lead him to buried family secrets and a forgotten purpose. The question is, was finding that donkey an accident, or was he meant to be there? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The photograph in Levi Cooper's shirt pocket had been there so long the edges had worn soft as cloth. In it, a younger version of himself stood beside his grandfather on a ranch somewhere in New Mexico, both of them squinting into the sun with genuine smiles. That boy in the picture had believed the world made sense, that hard work and honesty would see a man through. The man carrying that photo now knew better. Levi had turned 43 that spring, though he felt considerably older. The years had a way of piling on when you made the wrong choices, trusted the wrong people, let good things slip through your fingers like water. He'd worked ranches from Montana to Texas, always moving on when things got complicated or when his past caught up with him. Nothing criminal, mind you, just debts, disappointments, and the kind of reputation that follows a man who can't seem to hold on to anything. The truck that brought him to Redemption Flats had died 10 miles back. He'd walked the rest of the way in boots that needed resoling, carrying everything he owned in a canvas duffel that wasn't even half full. The June heat pressed down on the desert like a physical weight, turning the air thick and heavy. Sweat soaked through his denim shirt, and dust coated his throat with every breath. Redemption Flats wasn't much to look at. The town had died slow over the past 20 years as the mines played out and the railroad rerouted. Now it was just a handful of buildings clinging to existence along a 2-lane highway that hardly anyone used anymore. The general store still operated, more out of stubbornness than profit. A gas station with 2 pumps sat at the edge of town. Everything else, the old bank, the hotel, most of the houses stood empty, windows dark and doors hanging crooked on rusted hinges. Levi had come here because the man who'd given him a ride said there was an auction. Some old properties being sold off for taxes, dirt cheap. When you only have $15.73 to your name, dirt cheap sounds like a fortune. The auction was held in front of the general store on a Saturday afternoon. Levi counted maybe 20 people in attendance, most of them locals, who'd come more for entertainment than any serious intent to buy. The auctioneer was a man named Tom Richter, 70 if he was a day, wearing a battered cowboy hat and a bolo tie that had probably been fashionable back when Eisenhower was president. "Next lot," old Tom called out, his voice still strong despite his years, "is the old barn property out on the eastern edge. Half-acre, more or less. Structure's still standing, though I can't vouch for how long. No water rights, no utilities, no road access to speak of." He paused, looking over the sparse crowd with eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything anymore. "Let's start the bidding at $20. Silence. Someone coughed. A screen door banged shut somewhere down the street. 20? Old Tom tried again. "It's a barn, folks. Roof's still mostly on it." More silence. Levi found himself studying the property listing sheet, such as it was. Just a hand-drawn map showing the location and a note about the tax default. Something about that barn spoke to him, though he couldn't have said why. Maybe it was just that he understood what it meant to be abandoned, left behind, forgotten. 15, he heard himself say. Heads turned. Old Tom looked at him with an expression that might have been pity or approval, or both. $15. Do I hear 16? Nothing? 15 going once? Tom paused, giving the crowd one more chance. Going twice. He brought down his gavel on a wooden crate. Sold to the gentleman in the blue shirt for $15. Just like that, Levi Cooper owned property for the first time in his life. It cost him nearly everything he had, but it was his. The feeling that washed over him wasn't quite pride. He was too worn down for that, but it was something close. A small, stubborn spark of hope that maybe finally he'd found a place to stop running. Old Tom handled the paperwork with efficient simplicity, filling out forms in triplicate with a fountain pen that left ink smudges on Levi's fingers. "You know what you're getting into?" the old man asked, not unkindly. "A barn?" Levi said. "More than that." Tom studied him over wire-rimmed glasses. "That property's got history. Been sitting empty for better than 20 years. But before that, it was part of something bigger. You ever heard the name Cooper?" Levi went still. Cooper was his surname, common enough that it shouldn't have meant anything. But the way old Tom said it, with weight and intention, made Levi's pulse quicken. "It's my name too." Tom's eyebrows rose a fraction. "Is that so? Well now, isn't that interesting?" He tapped the deed with one gnarled finger. "This barn used to be part of the Cooper Ranch, way back. Big spread in its day. All broken up and sold off now, but that barn—" He shook his head. "Nobody wanted it. Some folks say it's cursed. Others say it's blessed. Depends who you ask. What do you say?" "I say it's been waiting." Tom handed over the deed. "You take care out there, Mr. Cooper, and don't be surprised if you find more than you bargained for." Levi walked the 3 miles to his new property as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The barn sat alone in a shallow valley, surrounded by scrub brush and sandy soil. It was larger than he'd expected, 30 feet long, maybe 20 wide, built from weathered wood that had bleached almost white under decades of desert sun. The roof sagged in the middle but hadn't collapsed. 2 small windows, both broken, flanked a wide door that hung slightly ajar. The silence out here was absolute. No traffic noise, no voices, no machinery. Just the whisper of wind through sage and the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. Levi stood before his barn and felt the weight of isolation settle over him. This was it. This was all he had. A falling-down barn in the middle of nowhere, bought with his last money. He took a breath and pulled the door open wider. Hinges screamed in protest, and dust swirled in the shaft of golden light that fell across the dirt floor. Levi stepped inside, giving his eyes time to adjust to the dimness. That's when he saw the donkey. The animal stood in the far corner, perfectly still, watching him with dark, intelligent eyes. It was grey, medium-sized, with long ears that swiveled toward him like radar dishes. Ribs showed through its dusty coat, and its hooves needed trimming, but it held itself with a dignity that seemed almost human. Levi froze. The donkey didn't move, didn't bray, just looked at him with an expression that felt far too knowing. They stared at each other for a long moment, man and beast, both of them stranded in this forgotten place. "Well," Levi said quietly, his voice rough from disuse and desert dust. "Didn't expect company." The donkey's ears flicked forward. It took one careful step toward him, then another, moving with deliberate calm. Levi held still, letting the animal approach at its own pace. When it was close enough, the donkey extended its nose and sniffed his hand, his shirt, investigating him with gentle thoroughness. "You been here long?" Levi asked, knowing he wouldn't get an answer but needing to fill the silence anyway. "Somebody forget about you?" The donkey had no collar, no brand that Levi could see. Its coat was rough with neglect, but underneath the dirt and dust, the animal seemed sound. Hungry and alone, but not sick or injured. How long had it been surviving out here? And why had it stayed when it could have wandered off in search of better circumstances? Levi found himself thinking about his grandfather, the one in the photograph. The old man had loved animals, treated them with respect and kindness. Always said you could judge a person's character by how they handled creatures that depended on them. "I'm going to call you Moses," Levi decided. "My grandfather had a mule named Moses, stubborn as they come but loyal to the bone." He reached out slowly and touched the donkey's neck. The animal leaned into his hand, accepting the contact like it had been waiting for it. That first night, Levi spread his bedroll on the barn floor while Moses watched from his corner. Neither of them had much. Levi had a few cans of beans in his duffel, some crackers, a canteen of water from the general store. He opened a can of beans and ate half, then on impulse poured the rest into a rusty bucket he'd found and set it in front of the donkey. Moses approached cautiously, sniffed the offering, then ate with careful, grateful bites. When the bucket was empty, the donkey looked at Levi with eyes that seemed to hold a universe of understanding, then settled down on the floor with a soft grunt. Levi lay in his bedroll, staring up at the rafters where moonlight filtered through gaps in the roof. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes sang their lonely songs. Closer, just a few feet away, Moses breathed steady and calm, a living presence in the darkness. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Levi didn't feel entirely alone. He had a barn, a donkey, and exactly 73 cents in his pocket. It wasn't much of a foundation to build a life on, but it was more than he'd had that morning. As sleep pulled him under, Levi found himself thinking about the photograph in his pocket, about his grandfather's smile, and about old Tom's strange words. The barn had been waiting. Maybe he had been too. Morning came with light so bright it hurt. Levi woke stiff and sore, his back protesting the hard floor, and his mouth tasting like copper and dust. Moses was already awake, standing near the door with his ears pricked forward, alert to something Levi couldn't perceive. "You hear something, old friend?" Levi pushed himself upright, joints cracking. He was getting too old to sleep on barn floors, but beggars couldn't afford to be particular. The donkey turned to look at him, made a soft sound that wasn't quite a bray, then walked deliberately to a spot near the center of the barn. There Moses began pawing at the ground with one hoof over and over, raising small clouds of dirt. Levi watched, curious. Animals didn't do things without reason. He'd learned that much in his years working with livestock. Moses wasn't agitated or distressed. This was purposeful behavior, insistent. The donkey pawed the same spot again, then looked at Levi as if to say, "Pay attention." "All right, I'm coming." Levi walked over, his boots stirring up more dust. Where Moses had been digging, the dirt looked disturbed, looser than the surrounding floor. Levi knelt and brushed away the surface layer with his hand. Beneath the dirt he felt wood, not just the ground, but floorboards. Most of the barn had a dirt floor, but here someone had laid down planks. Time and neglect had buried them under years of accumulated dust and debris, but they were still there. And one of them, Levi discovered as he cleared more dirt away, was loose. Moses made another soft sound, almost encouraging. "You know something, don't you?" Levi worked his fingers under the loose board. It came up with surprising ease, revealing a dark space beneath. Using the board as a lever, he pried up 2 more planks, creating an opening about 2 feet square. The hole beneath was shallow, maybe 8 inches deep, carved into the hardpan earth. And sitting in that hollow, wrapped in oilcloth that had kept the worst of the moisture away, was a rusted tin box. Levi's hands trembled slightly as he lifted it out. The box was about the size of a large book, its metal surface pitted with age, but still intact. A simple latch held it closed. He carried it to where better light fell through the broken windows and sat down with his back against the wall. Moses came and stood beside him, watching with those unnervingly intelligent eyes. "Let's see what we've got." Levi worked the latch. It resisted, frozen with rust and time, but finally gave way with a snap. He opened the lid. Inside, protected from the elements by the oilcloth wrapping, lay a bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon, and beneath them a brass key with an ornate head. Levi picked up the letters carefully. The paper was yellowed and brittle, the handwriting on the envelopes elegant but faded. The top envelope was addressed simply to J.C. No other name, no address. The stamp was from 1948. With great care, Levi opened it and unfolded the letter inside. The handwriting was a woman's, flowing and practiced. "My dearest Jay, I write this knowing I may never have the courage to send it. And if I do, you may never forgive me for what I must tell you. Father has discovered our meetings. He was in a terrible rage this morning, threatened to send me away to my aunt in California if I don't agree to end all contact with you. He says a daughter of the Miller family cannot associate with..." The letter ended there, or perhaps there had been another page now lost to time. Levi stared at the words, his mind racing. J.C. His grandfather's initials had been J.C., Jonas Cooper. Could this really be about him? He opened another envelope, this one dated 1947. My dear Jonas. So the letter did say Jonas. Levi's pulse quickened. I cannot stop thinking about what you said by the well. You asked me to wait, to have faith that we would find a way to be together, despite Father's objections. I want to believe you, truly I do. But Jonas, you must understand the impossible position we face. My family controls half the land in this county. Your family owns the other half, and our fathers have hated each other since their own father's time. Some feuds, they say, cannot be mended, but I believe in you. I believe in us. Meet me Thursday at sunset where the cottonwoods grow tall. I have something I must tell you, something that changes everything. Yours always, Eleanor. Levi whispered the name into the dusty air. Moses shifted beside him, as if in acknowledgement. He went through more letters, each one revealing pieces of a story. Jonas Cooper and Eleanor Miller had been in love, forbidden love, between the children of rival families. The letters spoke of secret meetings, stolen moments, desperate plans. And running through all of them was a thread of something darker, mentions of Jonas's brother, Samuel, who was described as ambitious and ruthless. One letter from 1950 made Levi sit up straighter. Jonas, Samuel came to see me today. He knows about the baby. I don't know how he found out, but he knows. He said terrible things, made threats. He told me you had agreed to leave the valley, to give up your claim to the Cooper land, in exchange for Father leaving us in peace. He said you were packing to leave and hadn't even had the courage to tell me yourself. I don't believe him. I can't believe him. But Jonas, I'm frightened. Samuel showed me papers, documents with what looked like your signature. He says the Cooper ranch will be his now, that you've signed everything over. Please tell me it isn't true. Please tell me you haven't abandoned us. The baby moves inside me now. Your child, Jonas, our child. I need to know you're still fighting for us. Levi had to set the letter down, his hands shaking. Eleanor had been pregnant with Jonas's child. His grandfather had been a father, which meant Levi's own father might have been. He grabbed another letter, frantically searching for more information. This one was dated 1951, in different handwriting. Masculine, hurried Eleanor. They think I'm dead. Samuel arranged it well, made it look like an accident out at the canyon. But I survived. Barely. I'm hiding now, can't let them know. If Samuel finds out I'm alive, he'll finish what he started. He has the documents. Forged my signature, stole everything. The law believes him, because he has paper and I have nothing but my word. I can't come to you. They're watching you, waiting to see if I'll contact you. If I appear now, they'll know the child is mine, and Samuel will use it against us both. He'll take our baby, Eleanor. He has the power and the money and the law on his side. Trust the barn. I've hidden everything there, the proof, the truth, all of it. One day someone will come, someone who needs to know. Keep the faith, my love. Keep our child safe. The donkey will remember. The donkey will know when it's time. Yours in this life and the next. Jonas Levi sat in stunned silence. The barn, this barn, Jonas had hidden here, lived here in secret while everyone thought he was dead. The letters painted a picture of betrayal that cut deep. A brother who'd tried to commit murder, who'd stolen an entire ranch through forgery and lies. And Eleanor, loving Jonas even as she carried his child, forced to pretend he was gone. What happened to the baby? What happened to Eleanor? The brass key lay at the bottom of the tin box, mysterious and purposeful. Levi picked it up, feeling the weight of it. A key to what? There were no locks in this barn, no doors that would need such an ornate key. Moses had settled down on the floor, resting his head on his hooves, watching Levi with patient eyes. The donkey will remember, Jonas had written. The donkey will know when it's time. Have you been here all along? Levi asked softly. Your ancestors, I mean. Waiting, like Jonas said. The donkey's ears flicked, but he didn't move. In the silence of the barn, with dust motes floating in the morning light and the weight of decades-old secrets in his hands, Levi felt the world shift beneath him. He'd come here looking for nothing more than a place to exist, a refuge from his failures. But this was bigger than that. This was his family, his blood, his grandfather's stolen life, Jonas Cooper. Eleanor Miller, a lost baby, a stolen ranch, and somehow, impossibly, this barn and this donkey had preserved it all, waiting for someone to come back and discover the truth. Levi looked at the letters spread around him, at the mysterious key, at the devoted animal who'd led him to this discovery. His grandfather had written, "One day someone will come, someone who needs to know." That someone was him. He thought he was buying a barn for $15. What he'd actually bought was a key to the past, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to set things right. The next few days passed in a blur of physical labor and racing thoughts. Levi worked on the barn from dawn until dark, doing what he could with no money and limited tools. He cleared debris from the corners, swept years of accumulated dust and animal droppings, patched the worst holes in the walls with scrap wood he found scattered around the property. Moses watched it all with calm interest, occasionally wandering off to graze on the sparse desert vegetation, always returning by evening. On the third day, while clearing out what had once been a tack room at the back of the barn, Levi's shovel struck something solid beneath a pile of rotted hay. He knelt and dug with his hands, uncovering a wooden sign about 3 feet long and a foot wide. Years of burial had darkened the wood, but the hand-carved letters were still clear, cut deep and filled with faded paint. Cooper and Sons Ranch Est. 1891. Levi sat back on his heels, gripping the sign with both hands. Here was proof solid and undeniable. His family, Jonas's family, had established this ranch more than 80 years ago. The words "and sons" implied generations, a legacy meant to be passed down. But instead, it had all been stolen, buried, forgotten. He carried the sign outside and propped it against the barn wall, brushing away the dirt with careful hands. The craftsmanship was excellent. Someone had taken real pride in making this sign. Probably Jonas's father, or maybe his grandfather. It represented hope and ambition, the belief that what you built would last beyond your own lifetime. Moses came over to investigate, sniffing the sign with interest. The donkey made a low sound, almost like approval, then walked purposefully to the eastern corner of the property. Levi followed, curious about the animal's strange behavior. At the property line, where desert scrub gave way to rockier ground, Moses stopped and began pawing at a cluster of stones. Levi crouched down, moving rocks aside, and found the remains of a fence post. The wood had mostly rotted away, but the metal base was still there, along with rusted wire. This was the boundary, Levi said aloud. The edge of the ranch. He looked out across the empty land, trying to imagine how far the Cooper property had once extended. Miles, probably. Enough to support cattle, horses, a real operation. All of it gone now, parceled out and sold, leaving just this half-acre and the barn as a forgotten remnant. But Moses seemed to want to show him more. The donkey led him to 3 other corners over the next hour, each marked with similar remnants of fencing. The animal moved with clear purpose, as if following a map only he could see, as if he'd walked this boundary many times before, or his ancestors had, and the knowledge had been passed down somehow. Your great-great-grandfather probably hauled supplies for Jonas, Levi said, patting the donkey's dusty neck. Is that how you know? Stories in the blood? By the end of the week, Levi had run through what little food he'd had and needed to find work. He walked into Redemption Flats one morning, arriving at the general store just as Martha Brennan was opening up. Martha was somewhere in her 70s, rail thin and sharp-eyed, with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun. She looked Levi over with frank appraisal as he stepped inside. You're the one who bought the old barn. Yes, ma'am. Levi Cooper. Her expression shifted, something flashing in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or surprise. Cooper. Haven't heard that name spoken aloud around here in a long time. You knew my family. Knew of them. Martha moved behind the counter, her movements economical and precise. Everyone knew the Coopers back when. Big family, owned half the valley. Then it all fell apart. Tragedy and betrayal, the way folks tell it. Levi's pulse quickened. What kind of betrayal? Martha studied him for a long moment, weighing something in her mind. You really don't know? I'm starting to find out. There were letters in the barn. They mentioned Jonas Cooper and someone named Samuel. Jonas and Samuel. Martha nodded slowly. Brothers. Jonas was the older one, supposed to inherit the ranch when their father passed. Good man by all accounts. Honest, fair. But Samuel was ambitious. Wanted more than his portion. Wanted it all. She paused, measuring her words. There was an accident. Jonas disappeared, presumed dead. Samuel produced documents showing Jonas had signed everything over before he died. Within a year, Samuel owned the entire ranch. But Jonas didn't die. Not then anyway. Martha's eyebrows rose. You found something in those letters? Enough to know Jonas was alive, hiding, because Samuel tried to kill him. Levi leaned against the counter. There was a woman, too. Eleanor Miller. At that name, Martha's face softened. Eleanor. Lord, I haven't thought about her in years. Beautiful woman, sad eyes. She lived alone in that big house on the hill until she died. Must be 15 years ago now. Never married, never had children that anyone knew of. Folks said she'd had a broken heart she never got over. Never had children that anyone knew of. Levi filed that away. Eleanor had been pregnant in the letters, but if no one knew about the child, then what happened? Was the baby born? Did it survive? Ma'am, I'm looking for work. Odd jobs, day labor, anything. I need to eat, and I need some supplies to fix up the barn. Martha considered him. Why fix it up? It's just an old barn on worthless land. Because it's mine, Levi said simply. Because Jonas Cooper was my grandfather, and someone needs to remember what happened to him. Something in his words must have touched her, because Martha's expression gentled. There's a rancher 15 miles north needs help with fence repair. Pays not much, but it's honest. And she hesitated, then continued, you should know, Samuel's grandson still lives around here. Victor Brennan. That's my son, though we haven't spoken in years. He owns a development company, has big plans for the valley. If he finds out you're asking questions about the Cooper land, about Jonas, he won't be pleased. Why not? Because everything the Brennan family has, everything, is built on what Samuel Cooper stole. If the truth came out, if there was proof Jonas never signed those documents, it would undermine Victor's entire claim to the land he's planning to develop. Martha pulled out a scrap of paper and drew a rough map. Here's how you get to the ranch that needs help. Tell them I sent you. Levi took the paper, but his mind was reeling. Samuel's grandson, the betrayal, had echoed down through generations, just like the loyalty of the donkeys had. Over the next 2 weeks, Levi worked when he could find it. Fence repair, livestock handling, equipment maintenance. The jobs were scattered and irregular, but he earned enough to buy food for himself and grain for Moses, plus some basic tools and materials for the barn. He fell into a routine, work during the day, come home to the barn at dusk, eat a simple meal while reading through Jonas's letters again and again. Trying to piece together the full story, Moses remained his constant companion. The donkey followed him when he worked around the property, stood guard at night, seemed to sense when Levi was troubled or discouraged. There was something almost supernatural about the animal's awareness, the way he appeared exactly when needed. One evening, as the light faded and Levi was measuring a beam for repair, Moses walked over to the main support post in the center of the barn. The donkey pressed his nose against the wood, held it there, then looked at Levi with clear expectation. What now? Levi walked over, running his hand along the post where Moses had indicated. The wood was rough, weathered, scarred from years of use. And there, about 5 feet up, where it would be easy to miss in the dim light, someone had carved letters into the grain. Levi grabbed his lantern and held it close. J.C. plus E.M. 1945. His fingers traced the carving. Jonas and Eleanor, marking their love in the wood of this barn, making it permanent in the only way they could. The letters were deep, carved with care and devotion. Around them were other, smaller carvings, dates, initials of horses or cattle maybe, the accumulated record of a working ranch. But JC plus EM stood out, deliberate and centered. A declaration of love in a place where Jonas had once felt safe before everything fell apart. Levi stood in the gathering darkness, one hand on the carved post, the other resting on Moses's warm neck. Somewhere out there, the stolen ranch land spread under the same stars. Samuel's descendants lived in comfort and prosperity. And here in this humble barn was the truth, written in old letters carved in wood, remembered by a donkey whose ancestors had witnessed it all. "They can't erase you," Levi said quietly, speaking to his grandfather across the decades. "I won't let them." The tin box held more than Levi had first realized. Late one night, unable to sleep, he went through its contents again by lamplight, and tucked beneath the bundle of letters he found another one, separate from the rest. The envelope had never been sealed, as if Eleanor had written it but never sent it, or perhaps written it never intending for it to leave her hands at all. The paper was different too, expensive stationery with her initials embossed at the top. E.M. Eleanor Miller. Levi opened it with trembling fingers. "My dearest Jonas, it is late, and I write this by candlelight in my room while Father sleeps downstairs, believing I have finally accepted his decree that I must never see you again. He does not know, cannot know, that you come to me still, that we meet in secret, that every moment with you is worth all the risk. Tonight you ask me again to run away with you, to leave everything behind and start fresh somewhere no one knows our names. And tonight I nearly said yes. I nearly agreed to abandon this house, my family name, the safety of the Miller fortune, because what is any of that compared to you? But there is something you must know before you ask again, before we make any decision we cannot undo. Jonas, I am carrying your child. I have known for 6 weeks now, kept the secret close, afraid to tell you because I know what it means. My father will disinherit me if he finds out. Your brother Samuel will use it as leverage, claim I trapped you, that you are unfit to lead the Cooper Ranch, if you cannot even forgive me. I cannot write his cruel words. The baby moves inside me sometimes, just the faintest flutter. A baby, Jonas, a life we made together out of love, not duty or family obligation or land disputes. Pure love. I need you to understand something. Whatever we decide, wherever we go or don't go, I will never regret this child. I will never regret you, even if we must hide for the rest of our lives, even if we lose everything else, we will have this. We will have each other and the family we are creating. Meet me tomorrow by the old well at sunset. We will talk, really talk, and decide our future together. I trust you, Jonas Cooper. I trust us. Yours with all my heart, Eleanor. Levi read the letter 3 times, his throat tight with emotion. Here was the moment before everything went wrong. Eleanor full of hope and love and courage. Jonas presumably ready to protect her and their child no matter the cost. But then Samuel had intervened, had tried to murder his own brother and steal everything. Had Eleanor ever gotten to tell Jonas about the baby in person? The timeline in the other letters suggested she had, that Jonas knew and was trying to find a way to keep them all safe when Samuel struck. But the question that haunted Levi was simpler and more urgent. What happened to the child? The next day, he hitched a ride into the county seat, a small city 40 miles away that had a proper records office and a library. He spent the morning searching through old newspapers on microfilm, following the thread of the Cooper family story through public record. Jonas Cooper, born 1920, declared missing in 1952 after what was described as a tragic accident in the Canyonlands. His body was never recovered. 7 years later, in 1959, he was declared legally dead. Samuel Cooper, born 1923, took control of the family ranch in 1952 through previously executed documents. He expanded the operation significantly, became a prominent local figure, served on the county commission. He died in 1968, leaving the ranch to his son Robert, who sold most of it to developers in the 1970s, but it was Eleanor's records that made Levi's hands shake as he turned the microfilm wheel. Eleanor Miller, born 1924, died 1991. The obituary was brief. noting she was the last of the Miller family, that she had lived quietly in the family home, that she had been a generous donor to local charities. No mention of marriage, no mention of children, but the death certificate, which Levi had to request from the county clerk, told a different story. Under surviving relatives, it listed none. Under children living or deceased, it noted Alice Eleanor Miller, deceased 1948, infant. Levi stared at the certificate. Eleanor had given birth in 1948, which matched the timeline of the pregnancy mentioned in her letter. But the baby had died in infancy, or at least that's what the official record claimed. Why then had Jonas's later letters spoken about protecting our child and keeping the baby safe? Had he not known the child died? Or was there something else going on? The county clerk, a bored young woman filing her nails, looked up when Levi asked if there were any other records for Alice Eleanor Miller. Just the death certificate, she said. No birth certificate on file here, though, which is odd. Maybe she was born in another county. Or maybe, Levi thought, she wasn't born at all. At least not officially. Not if Eleanor was trying to hide the baby from her father, from Samuel, from everyone who might use the child as a weapon in the Cooper family war. He spent another hour in the library, searching phone books and city directories from the 1950s through 1970s, looking for any trace of Alice Miller or Alice Cooper. Nothing. The trail went cold in 1948, as if the child had simply vanished from record. Frustrated and exhausted, Levi hitched his way back to Redemption Flats as the sun began to set. Moses was waiting at the barn, standing perfectly still in the doorway like a sentinel. When Levi approached, the donkey turned and walked purposefully away from the barn, heading to the western edge of the property. Not now, friend. I'm tired, but Moses kept going, looking back once to make sure Levi was following. With a sigh, Levi trudged after him. The donkey led him past the property boundary, into the scrubland beyond, to a spot where the ground dipped into a shallow depression. There, hidden by sagebrush and tamarisk, was an old well. Levi almost walked right past it. The opening was covered with rotted boards, and the stone rim was barely visible above the ground level. But Moses stopped directly beside it and poured the earth, just as he had done to reveal the tin box. "A well," Levi said, pushing aside the brush. The stone rim was solid, built to last. He cleared away more vegetation and found markings carved into the stones, symbols that looked like letters but weren't quite. The same symbols he'd seen in some of Jonas's letters, cryptic notes in the margins that Levi hadn't been able to decipher. He knelt and examined the well's opening. The boards across it were dangerously rotted. He pulled them away carefully, expecting to find water below, or at least dampness. Instead, when he dropped a pebble into the darkness, it clattered against stone almost immediately. The well was dry, had been for years, but wells were good hiding places, private, secure, easy to access if you knew where to look. "Jonas," Levi whispered, "this is where you hid, isn't it? Where you kept things safe." Moses made a soft sound, almost like agreement. The light was fading fast. Levi would need rope and a lantern if he was going to descend into the well, and he'd need to do it safely. But he couldn't shake the feeling that this was important, that Moses had led him here for a reason. Eleanor's letter had mentioned meeting by the old well. This had to be the place, a spot that meant something to both Jonas and Eleanor, where they'd made their plans and shared their secrets. As full darkness fell, Levi walked back to the barn with Moses beside him. The donkey's presence was comforting, steady. Whatever Jonas had hidden in that well, it had waited decades already. It could wait one more night, but Levi lay awake for hours, staring at the rafters, thinking about a baby who'd officially died in 1948 but might have actually lived. About a woman who'd loved so deeply she was willing to give up everything. About a man who'd hidden in a barn for years, protecting his family from the shadows. And about the symbols carved into the well's stone rim. A message left in a code only those who needed to know would understand. Tomorrow, he would go down into the well. Tomorrow, he would find out what Jonas had left behind. Levi bought 50 feet of rope at the general store the next morning. along with a battery-powered lantern and a few other supplies. Martha watched him count out his carefully saved dollars and asked no questions, but her expression was knowing. She understood somehow that he was getting closer to something important. By noon, he was back at the well with Moses standing guard nearby. The day was hot, the kind of heat that made the air shimmer and turned every breath into work. Levi tied the rope to a sturdy mesquite tree, tested his weight against it, then lowered himself into the well's opening. The descent was only about 15 feet. The well wasn't as deep as he'd feared. His boots found the bottom, and he clicked on the lantern, swinging it around to illuminate the space. The well was dry, probably had been for decades. The walls were stone, carefully fitted solid work, and carved into those stones at eye level on every side were words. Levi's breath caught. This wasn't just a well, it was a chronicle, a testament. Jonas's story, carved in stone where no one could erase it. He started at what seemed to be the beginning, marked with a date, June 1950. I write this so someone will know the truth. My brother Samuel tried to kill me today. We argued about the ranch, about father's will, about his debts to the wrong kind of men. When I refused to sign over my share, he struck me from behind and pushed me into the canyon. I fell 20 feet, landed in the river. He must have thought I drowned, but I survived. The next section, dated a week later. I am hiding in the barn now, the old one father built before I was born. Samuel believes me dead. The whole town believes it. I heard him tell Eleanor I ran off, abandoned her. She thinks I'm a coward. I can't reveal myself yet. Samuel has men watching her, waiting to see if I contact her. If they know I survived, he will finish the job, and Eleanor will be in danger. More dates, more entries. Jonas had lived in this barn for months, then years, carved his story a little at a time. He detailed how Samuel had forged documents with his signature, how he'd claimed the ranch through legal manipulation, how he'd made sure Jonas would be declared dead. But other entries spoke of Eleanor. She came today, left food and water in the barn like always. She knows I'm alive now. I revealed myself to her last month when I couldn't bear her believing I'd abandoned her. She wept. She held me. She told me about our daughter, Alice, born 2 months ago, perfect and healthy. Eleanor told her family the baby died, buried an empty coffin, arranged papers through her sympathetic aunt in California. Our daughter lives there now, safe with a family who will love her. Eleanor did this to protect Alice from her father, from Samuel, from all of it. I will never hold my own child, but she will live, and that is enough. Levi's hand shook as he traced the carved letters. So Alice had survived. The death certificate was a fiction, a necessary lie to keep the baby safe. His grandmother, because that's what Alice must have been, had lived, had grown up, had children of her own, one of whom would be Levi's mother. He'd thought his family history was simple loss and bad luck. But it was this. Deliberate sacrifice, love strong enough to give up everything. More entries detailed the years. Jonas had watched from hiding as Samuel prospered, as the ranch grew, as his brother became a pillar of the community built on lies. Eleanor visited when she could, always careful, always afraid of leading Samuel's suspicions back to Jonas. Then, dated 1952, I grow weaker. Whatever injuries I sustained in the fall have caught up with me. Pain in my chest, trouble breathing. Eleanor brought medicine, but I know it's my time. I'm not afraid of death. I'm only sorry I could not give Eleanor and Alice the life they deserved. I leave this record so that one day, if God wills it, a Cooper will return and know the truth. The evidence is buried in the foundation. The well holds the key, and the donkey will remember. Moses has been with me through it all, faithful, steady. When I die, he will watch over this place, his children and their children after them. Donkeys live long and remember longer. When the right person comes, Moses will know. The last entry was simple. To whoever reads this, don't let them forget. Don't let the lie stand forever. Justice delayed is not justice denied, not if someone is willing to fight for it. Be well and God bless. Jonas Cooper, 1952. Levi stood in the bottom of the well, tears streaming down his face. His great-grandfather had died alone in a barn, hidden like a fugitive, denied even the dignity of his own name on a gravestone. And yet he'd had hope enough to leave this message, to believe that someday someone would care enough to uncover the truth. "I'm here, Jonas," Levi said aloud, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "I'm listening." He swept the lantern across the well bottom one more time, and something glinted in the beam. Wedged between two stones, almost invisible, was a piece of metal. Levi knelt and worked it free, a pocket watch. Silver, tarnished nearly black with age, but when he rubbed it against his shirt, the engraving on the back became visible. To Jonas, from father, 1940. Levi's throat tightened. This watch had been a gift, probably for Jonas's 20th birthday. He'd carried it through his life until the very end, and then left it here as a marker, a piece of proof that he was real, that this wasn't just a story carved by a madman. Levi climbed out of the well with the watch clutched in his hand. Moses was waiting at the top, and when the donkey saw the watch, he made a sound, not distress but recognition, as if he'd known it was there all along. "Your great-great-grandfather Moses was there when he left this, wasn't he?" Levi asked. Jonas told him to watch over it. "And you've been doing that ever since." The donkey pressed his head against Levi's chest in what could only be called an embrace. That afternoon, a truck pulled up to the barn. Levi watched it approach, weariness settling in his gut. The vehicle was new and expensive, out of place in this forgotten corner of the desert. The man who got out was in his 50s, well-dressed in crisp khakis and a polo shirt, wearing sunglasses that probably cost more than Levi made in a month. "You must be the fellow who bought the barn," the man said, not offering his hand. "I'm Victor Brennan. I own the property development company that's been buying land in this area." Victor. Martha's estranged son, Samuel Cooper's grandson, Levi Cooper. Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. Cooper. Interesting coincidence. "Listen, I'll get right to the point. I'd like to buy this property from you. I'm prepared to offer $5,000, considerably more than the $15,000 you paid for it." $5,000 was more money than Levi had seen in years. It was tempting, dangerously so. But he thought of the watch in his pocket, the words carved in stone, Jonas's faith that someone would come and fight for justice. "Not interested in selling." Victor's expression hardened. "Mr. Cooper, you don't understand the situation. This land is worthless. No water rights, no access, no utilities. That barn is ready to collapse. You're squatting in a death trap. Take my offer and walk away with enough money to start fresh somewhere else." I said, "No, you're making a mistake." Victor pulled out a business card and tossed it on the ground between them. "When you change your mind, and you will, call that number. But the offer won't stay at 5,000 forever. These things have a way of decreasing in value when people don't act rationally." He got back in his truck and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust hanging in the air. Moses had come to stand beside Levi, and together they watched the truck disappear. "He's worried," Levi said quietly. "He knows I'm asking questions, and he's worried what I might find. That's why he wants me gone." The donkey made a low sound, protective and fierce. "Don't worry, friend. I'm not going anywhere." Levi pulled out the pocket watch, held it up to the sunlight. The metal gleamed despite the tarnish. "Jonas left this for me to find. He left all of it, and I'm going to make sure his story gets told, no matter what Victor Brennan threatens." But as he went back into the barn that evening, Levi couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just made a powerful enemy. Victor hadn't driven all the way out here just to make a simple offer. He was sending a message: leave or face consequences. Levi looked at Moses, at the barn that had sheltered his great-grandfather, at the well where Jonas had carved truth into stone. Some things were worth fighting for, even when the fight seemed impossible, especially then. 3 days after Victor's visit, Martha Brennan appeared at the barn just after dawn. She looked around nervously before approaching, and Levi understood immediately that this visit was secret, that she didn't want her son knowing she was here. "I brought you something," she said, pulling a rolled-up document from her canvas bag. "It's old, from 1895, the original land survey for this entire valley." Levi unrolled the map on the barn floor, weighing down the corners with stones. The paper was yellowed and fragile, the ink faded, but still legible. It showed the valley as it had been more than 80 years ago, divided into large parcels with family names marked: Cooper, Miller, Brennan, and a few others. The Cooper land was massive, nearly 3,000 acres extending from the mountains to the valley floor. And there, marked with careful notation, was the barn property and something else: underground spring, year-round flow, water, Levi breathed. Victor's been buying up land for a resort development, Martha explained. Golf courses, luxury homes, a spa, but it's all useless without water. This is desert country. You can't build what he wants to build without a reliable water source. She pointed to the spring marked on the map. That spring is on your property, Levi, or rather under it. The water rights were never separated from this parcel when everything else got divided up. I found this map in my husband's papers after he died. He'd been Samuel Cooper's business partner for years, and I think he kept it as insurance, leverage, if he ever needed it. Does Victor know? He knows there's water here somewhere. That's why he wants your land so desperately. Without those water rights, his entire development collapses. He's got investors, bank loans, contracts. If he can't deliver, he loses everything. Martha's expression was pained. He's my son, and I love him. But I can't stand by and watch him do to you what Samuel did to Jonas. It's happening again, don't you see? Another generation. Another Cooper being pushed off land that rightfully belongs to him. Levi felt the weight of history pressing down. Samuel's grandson trying to take what little remained of the Cooper legacy, just as Samuel had taken everything from Jonas. The pattern repeating, because the lie had never been corrected. The theft never acknowledged. "Why are you helping me?" he asked Martha. She was quiet for a long moment. "Because I've spent 30 years married to a man who benefited from Samuel's crimes, living in comfort bought with stolen land. I didn't know the full truth back then. Nobody talked about it, and I was too young to remember when it happened. But ignorance doesn't absolve complicity. And when I learned what really happened, what Samuel did to Jonas, to Eleanor," her voice broke, "I can't undo the past. But maybe I can help make one thing right." After Martha left, Levi spent hours studying the map, tracing property lines with his finger, understanding for the first time the true scope of what Jonas had lost. Not just a ranch, but a legacy. Not just land, but water, the most precious resource in the desert. Samuel hadn't just stolen property. He'd stolen his brother's future and the future of every Cooper descendant. Over the following weeks, Victor's pressure intensified. First came the official letter, delivered by a lawyer, claiming the barn was structurally unsound and represented a public safety hazard. The county would need to inspect it, and if it didn't meet code, it would be condemned and demolished. Then came the visits from Victor's employees, men in trucks who drive slowly past the property watching, making notes. They never threatened directly, but their presence was threatening enough. Levi was being watched, assessed, intimidated. Moses became increasingly protective. Whenever strangers approached, the donkey would position himself between them and Levi, ears back, ready to defend. One afternoon, 2 of Victor's men walked onto the property without permission, and Moses charged them, braying loudly enough to be heard a mile away. They scrambled back to their truck, cursing, and didn't return. "Good boy," Levi said, rubbing the donkey's ears. "Your ancestors would be proud." Word spread through Redemption Flats about the conflict. The town was small enough that everyone had an opinion, and the community divided along complicated lines. Some of the older residents remembered the Cooper family, remembered whispers about Samuel's suspicious rise to power. They supported Levi quietly, bringing him food sometimes, offering encouragement, but others had built their lives around the prosperity that Victor's development promised. New jobs, new money flowing into a dying town. They saw Levi as an obstacle, a drifter making trouble over ancient history that didn't matter anymore. At the general store one morning, Levi overheard 2 men talking. Cooper should take the money and move on. "What's he holding on to that wreck for? Pride?" I heard he's claiming the whole ranch should be his, going back to some old family dispute. Crazy talk. Victor says the guy's trying to shake him down, wants to hold up the whole development for a bigger payout. Levi didn't correct them. Let Victor spread whatever story he wanted. The truth would come out eventually. He went back to the well frequently, descending with his lantern to read Jonas's carved words again, finding details he'd missed before. Jonas had documented more than just his own story. He'd recorded specific dates, names, events that could be verified. The forgery of the documents, witnesses Samuel had bribed or threatened, business deals that happened suspiciously fast after Jonas's death, and scattered throughout the carvings were references to Eleanor's visits. She brought bread today and hope. Eleanor says our daughter is walking now. She still loves me, even though I can give her nothing but danger and hiding. The devotion between them echoed across the decades. Jonas had given up everything, his name, his ranch, his life in the sunlight, to protect Eleanor and their daughter. And Eleanor had never stopped coming, never stopped believing in him, even when the world said he was dead. One entry, carved near the bottom of the well, where Jonas's handwriting had grown shaky, struck Levi particularly hard. I watched Samuel ride past today, inspecting his fences, counting his cattle. He looked prosperous and satisfied. He has built an empire on my grave, but he does not sleep well. I have seen the lights in his house burning at 3 a.m. Guilt is patient. It waits, and even if I do not live to see justice, someone will. The truth is in the foundation. I have made sure of that. The truth is in the foundation. Jonas had written those words several times, always returning to that phrase. Levi had assumed he meant metaphorically, that the barn itself, the well, the carved messages were the foundation of truth. But the more he thought about it, the more literal it seemed, the barn's foundation, the actual stone and concrete base on which the structure was built. That evening, with Moses watching curiously, Levi began examining the barn's foundation more carefully. The building sat on a combination of stone pillars and packed earth, typical for structures of its age. But in one corner, partially hidden by years of accumulated debris, several stones seemed looser than the others. He worked carefully, removing stones one at a time. Behind them was a cavity in the foundation, deliberately created, about 2 feet square. And inside that cavity, wrapped in oilcloth and protected from moisture, was another bundle. Levi pulled it out with trembling hands. The oilcloth was similar to what had protected the tin box, and when he unwrapped it, he found a leather-bound journal, its cover worn but intact. Jonas's journal. The complete account. He sat there on the barn floor as the last light faded, Moses settling down beside him and opened to the first page. My name is Jonas Cooper, and this is the true account of what happened to me, to my family, and to the land that was stolen from us. If you are reading this, then you are either my descendant or someone who cares about justice. Either way, you deserve to know. Levi read through the night, turning pages carefully, absorbing every word. Jonas had documented everything, the dates, the events, the people involved. He'd tucked official documents into the journal, copies of his father's real will, photographs of the family, even the original ranch deed. He'd included his own marriage certificate, married by a traveling preacher to Eleanor Miller in 1947, and Alice's real birth certificate, showing both his and Eleanor's names as parents. The journal was evidence, real, solid legal evidence that everything Samuel had claimed was a lie, and tucked into the very last page was a handwritten will, dated 1952, signed by Jonas and witnessed by 2 names Levi didn't recognize. It left everything, the ranch, the land, all Cooper holdings, to my daughter Alice Eleanor Cooper and her descendants in perpetuity. Levi closed the journal and sat in the darkness. He'd found what Jonas had left for him, not just a story but proof. Not just family history, but legal standing. Victor Brennan wanted this land because it had water. But Levi was beginning to understand that it represented something far more valuable. The chance to restore what had been stolen, to speak for those who'd been silenced, to prove that some betrayals were too great to be forgotten. Moses rested his head on Levi's knee. Patient and faithful as his ancestors had been. "Tomorrow," Levi said quietly, stroking the donkey's ears. "Tomorrow we start fighting back." Levi read through Jonas's journal 3 times before the full impact hit him. The first reading was for the basic facts, the timeline of events, the documentation of Samuel's betrayal, the proof of forgery and attempted murder. The second reading was for the emotional weight, understanding the fear and love that had driven Jonas and Eleanor to make impossible choices. But it was the third reading, in the grey light of dawn with Moses dozing beside him, that Levi truly understood what he was holding. The journal entries near the middle detailed Alice's early years. Jonas had never met his daughter in person. It was too dangerous, but Eleanor had brought him photographs, stolen moments captured on film. Levi studied these photos carefully, pulling them from where Jonas had carefully tucked them between pages. A baby, perhaps 6 months old, with dark hair and serious eyes. Written on the back in Eleanor's handwriting, Alice, October 1947. "She has your chin, your stubbornness." Another photo, a toddler standing in a garden, holding a flower. "Alice at 2 years. Living with my Aunt Margaret in San Diego. She's happy and safe." More photos documenting Alice's growth. At 5, at 8, at 10. The last photo showed a young woman of about 18, standing in front of a house with a man in military uniform. On the back, Alice on her wedding day, 1965. She married James Whitmore, a good man. She does not know about us, and perhaps that is for the best. Let her have a life free from all this pain. Levi stared at that photo, at Alice's face. There was something familiar about her features, something that tugged at his memory. He pulled out his wallet and removed the single photograph he carried. His mother, taken when she was young, before life had worn her down. He held the 2 photos side by side. They were the same person. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His mother had been adopted, had always known she was adopted, but never knew by whom or why. She'd been raised by a woman she'd called Aunt Margaret. Later learned her birth mother's name was Eleanor Miller, but the trail had gone cold there. His mother had died 5 years ago, never knowing the full truth of where she'd come from, but Levi knew now. His mother was Alice, which meant Jonas Cooper was his great-grandfather, and Eleanor Miller was his great-grandmother. The barn he'd bought for $15 wasn't just connected to his family. It was his family's property, his inheritance, his birthright. His hands shook as he turned back to the journal, reading with new understanding. Every entry about our daughter was about his grandmother. Every expression of love and sacrifice was made for his bloodline. Jonas had died protecting Levi's family, even though he'd never known Levi would exist. The journal contained more than just personal reflections. Jonas had been methodical, almost obsessive, in documenting everything. He'd noted dates of meetings where Samuel had discussed his plans with associates, names of people who'd helped forge documents, specific lies that had been told. He'd even managed to obtain, Levi wasn't sure how, copies of some of the forged papers, which he'd annotated with notes showing how Samuel had manipulated his signature. But the most important document was the will. Jonas had written it himself, had it witnessed by 2 traveling ranch hands who'd been passing through, men who had no connection to the Cooper-Miller feud and no reason to lie. The will was clear and legal, I, Jonas Cooper, being of sound mind, hereby bequeath all my property, holdings, and rights, including all land deeded to me by my father Charles Cooper, and all water and mineral rights pertaining thereto, to my daughter, Alice Eleanor Cooper, and to her descendants in perpetuity. This supersedes any and all documents claiming I have signed over said property to my brother Samuel Cooper, as I have signed no such documents, and any bearing my name are forgeries, made under duress or without my knowledge or consent. The language was formal, careful, legally precise. Jonas might have been hiding in a barn, but he'd understood the importance of creating a document that would hold up in court. The witnesses had signed and dated it, May 15th, 1952, just weeks before Jonas died. There was more. Tucked into the journal's back cover was a marriage certificate, creased and faded, but official. Jonas Cooper and Eleanor Miller, married by one Reverend Thomas Ashford, on September 3rd, 1947. The marriage had been performed in secret, in the barn itself, with only the Reverend and two witnesses present, neither of whom were family members. And there was Alice's real birth certificate, not the falsified death certificate that had been filed publicly. Alice Eleanor Cooper, born April 2nd, 1948, to Jonas Cooper and Eleanor Miller Cooper. Parents' residence listed as Redemption Flats. Levi sat surrounded by the evidence of lives lived in shadow and sacrifice. Jonas hadn't just hidden to save himself. He'd orchestrated an elaborate deception to protect his wife and daughter from Samuel's reach. Eleanor had played her part, telling everyone her baby died, arranging for the child to be raised elsewhere under a different story. They'd given up their own happiness, their own life together, so that Alice could grow up safe and normal. And it had worked. Alice had lived a full life, had married, had children, including a daughter who would become Levi's mother. The Cooper bloodline had continued in secret, unknown to Samuel and his descendants, waiting for the moment when the truth could finally be told. The weight of realization pressed down on Levi. He wasn't just some drifter who'd stumbled onto a family mystery. He was the heir, the direct descendant Jonas had written about in his will. Everything Samuel had stolen, the ranch, the land, the water rights, all of it should have gone to Alice, and from her to Levi's mother, and from his mother to him. Victor Brennan's entire empire was built on land that legally belonged to Levi. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about a barn and half an acre anymore. If Jonas's will was valid, and Levi believed it was, then Levi had a legitimate claim to thousands of acres, including the land Victor was trying to develop. The water rights alone would be worth a fortune, but more than that, they represented justice for Jonas and Eleanor, recognition of the truth they'd died protecting, but claiming that inheritance would mean going to war with Victor, with the entire Brennan family, with everyone who'd benefited from Samuel's theft. It would mean lawyers and courts and a legal battle that could take years. Levi had 73 cents in his pocket and a barn that was barely standing. How could he possibly fight that fight? Moses stirred beside him, lifting his head to look at Levi with those knowing eyes. The donkey made a soft sound, almost like encouragement. "Your family waited decades for this," Levi said, touching the donkey's warm neck. "Generations of Moses watching over this place, keeping the secret safe. You knew someone would come back. You knew." He looked around the barn, at the carved initials on the support beam, at the spot where the tin box had been hidden, at the loose stones that had concealed the journal. Jonas had left a trail of breadcrumbs, a path for someone to follow. And Moses' ancestors had maintained vigil, passing down the knowledge somehow, keeping the barn and its secrets safe. Levi thought about his mother, how she'd struggled her whole life, working multiple jobs, barely scraping by. She'd been born into wealth. The Cooper Ranch had been one of the most prosperous in the region, but Samuel's theft had stolen that from her before she was even old enough to know what she'd lost. She died believing she came from nothing, that her birth parents had been too poor or too troubled to keep her. But the truth was the opposite. Her parents had loved her so much, they'd given her up to save her life. Jonas and Eleanor had sacrificed everything so that Alice could be safe and free. And now, 5 years after his mother's death, Levi had found the proof. He held in his hands the evidence that would restore her name, acknowledge her true parentage, and reclaim the legacy that should have been hers. The sun was fully up now, streaming through the barn's broken windows, painting everything in gold. Levi stood, the journal clutched carefully in his hands, and walked to where Moses stood by the door. "I'm going to fight for this," he said, as much to himself as to the donkey. "I'm going to take on Victor and his lawyers and whoever else stands in the way. Because this isn't just about me. It's about Jonas, about Eleanor, about Alice, my grandmother. It's about making sure their sacrifice meant something. Moses pushed his nose against Levi's chest in what had become their familiar gesture of solidarity. Levi looked out across the desert, toward the town, toward the land that had once been Cooper property. Samuel had thought he could erase Jonas, rewrite history to suit his own greed. Victor thought he could continue that erasure, pressure Levi into selling and disappearing. But they'd both made the same mistake, underestimating the power of truth and the determination of people who had nothing left to lose but their dignity. Jonas had written in the journal's final entry, "I leave this for whoever comes after me. I leave it as proof that some things cannot be stolen, no matter how much power the thief wields. Land can be taken, money can be stolen, documents can be forged, but the truth remains." Waiting patiently for someone brave enough to speak it, Levi would be that someone. He would speak the truth that Jonas had preserved in stone and ink and leather. He would fight for Alice's name, for his mother's memory, for the legacy that 3 generations of Coopers had been denied. The barn that cost $15 had given him something priceless: purpose, identity, and the chance to right a decades-old wrong. He wasn't just Levi Cooper anymore, drifter and failure. He was Jonas's great-grandson, Alice's grandson, the heir to the Cooper ranch, and he was done running. The lawyer's office in the county seat smelled like old paper and coffee. Ronald Pearson was in his 60s, with silver hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. He'd been practicing law in the region for 40 years, which meant he remembered the Cooper family, remembered when the ranch was still whole. Levi sat across from him, the journal and all its documents spread across the polished desk. Pearson had been examining them for the better part of an hour, occasionally making notes, his expression growing more serious with each page. "This is extraordinary," Pearson finally said, setting down Jonas's will with careful reverence. "I've heard rumors about the Cooper case for decades. Whispers that Samuel's claim wasn't legitimate, that Jonas didn't actually die in that canyon. But I never imagined there was this much documentation. Can it hold up in court?" Pearson leaned back in his chair, removing his glasses to rub his eyes. "Legally? Yes, this will is properly executed, witnessed, dated. The marriage certificate is valid. The birth certificate establishes clear lineage. And Jonas's documentation of the forgery, combined with these copies of the false documents," he tapped the papers. "This is compelling evidence of fraud. In a just world, this would be open and shut. But we don't live in a just world, Mr. Cooper. We live in a world where the Brennan family has held this land for 70 years, where they've paid taxes on it, developed it, sold portions of it to third parties who bought in good faith. Where challenging that claim will face not just Victor Brennan's lawyers, but potentially dozens of other property owners who'll lose their investments if your claim succeeds." Pearson put his glasses back on, meeting Levi's eyes. "You're not just taking on Victor. You're taking on the entire economic structure of this valley. I don't have a choice. You do, actually. You could take this evidence to Victor privately, negotiate a settlement. He'd probably pay handsomely to make this go away quietly. You could walk away with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life. That's not justice." "No," Pearson agreed softly. "It's not. But it's practical. And practicality keeps the lights on." He paused. "I'll be honest with you. A case like this could take years. 3, 5, maybe longer. The legal fees would be substantial, easily into 6 figures. Discovery, depositions, expert witnesses, title searches going back a century. And Victor will fight every step. He has resources. He has political connections. He'll make this as expensive and difficult as possible, hoping you'll run out of money or will before he does. What if I can't pay you?" Pearson smiled faintly. "I'm old enough that I don't need to worry about money anymore. And I've seen enough injustice in this valley to recognize when something needs to be challenged, regardless of whether it's profitable." He tapped the journal again. "Jonas Cooper left this evidence because he believed in justice delayed but not denied. I'd be honored to help prove him right. We'll work out payment when, if we win. When, Levi said firmly. When we win. That afternoon, Victor showed up at the barn again, but this time he wasn't alone. He brought 2 lawyers in expensive suits and a man Levi recognized from town as a county commissioner. Mr. Cooper, Victor said, his tone carefully controlled. I think we got off on the wrong foot before. I'd like to make you a new offer. $50,000 for this property, and you sign a document confirming you have no claims to any other land in the valley. That's 10 times my previous offer. More money than you've probably seen in your lifetime. Moses, standing beside Levi, made a low warning sound. I'm not selling, Levi said. Not for $50,000, not for any amount. One of the lawyers stepped forward. Mr. Cooper, my client is being extraordinarily generous. You should know that we've already filed papers with the county claiming adverse possession of this property. The Brennan family has maintained the surrounding land for decades, and this parcel has no clear chain of title. If you refuse to negotiate, we'll pursue legal action to have you removed. Then you better bring good lawyers, Levi said calmly. Because I've got documentation proving Jonas Cooper never signed over his property to Samuel. I've got a valid will, leaving everything to his daughter Alice, my grandmother. And I've got proof that every claim your client's family has made for 70 years is based on forgery and attempted murder. Victor's face went pale. The lawyers exchanged glances. The commissioner cleared his throat uncomfortably. You're bluffing, Victor said. But his voice lacked conviction. Come to the town hall meeting Saturday at noon, and I'll show everyone exactly what I have. Let the community decide who's telling the truth. After they left, Levi felt the weight of what he'd just done. He'd declared war. Victor would come at him with everything now. Legal pressure, social pressure, every weapon available to a man with money and influence. But word spread through Redemption Flats faster than a wildfire. By evening, Martha had heard about the confrontation and came to the barn with news. People are talking, she said. Some are excited, want to hear what evidence you have. Others are scared, worried about their property values if the old land claims get reopened. And Victor, she paused. He's telling everyone you're a con artist, that you're trying to extort money from him with fabricated documents. The documents are real. I know, and I'll testify to that. Martha's jaw was set with determination. I'll tell everyone what I found in my husband's papers, what I know about Samuel's dealings. And I'm not the only one. Some of the other old-timers remember things too. They've been quiet for years because who wants to accuse the richest family in the valley? But now that someone's finally standing up, they're ready to speak. Over the next few days, 3 elderly residents of Redemption Flats came to the barn to share their stories with Levi. Tom Richter, the auctioneer, had been a young ranch hand on the Cooper property in the 1950s. He'd seen Samuel's men destroying evidence after Jonas's death, had heard conversations he wasn't supposed to hear. Mary Chen, who ran a small cafe on the edge of town, remembered Eleanor Miller coming in for coffee in the years after Jonas disappeared. She always looked so sad, Mary said, like someone carrying a grief too heavy to set down. But every few months she'd come in looking lighter, almost peaceful for a day or two. I always wondered what gave her those moments of peace. She'd been to see Jonas, Levi explained. She'd visit him in the barn, bring him supplies. Those were the good days. Mary's eyes filled with tears. All those years, and she never stopped loving him. Never stopped being faithful. The third visitor was Ben Morrison, 87 years old, who'd worked for the county assessor's office in the 1950s. I processed the paperwork when Samuel claimed the property. There were irregularities, dates that didn't match, signatures that looked wrong. I mentioned it to my supervisor, but he told me to let it go, that the Cooper family business was too complicated for me to understand. Ben's weathered hands shook slightly. I should have pushed harder. Should have asked more questions. Maybe if I had, this could have been settled 70 years ago. You can help settle it now, Levi told him. As Saturday approached, Levi prepared his presentation. He organized the documents chronologically, created a timeline of events, practiced explaining the story clearly, and simply. Ronald Pearson helped him understand the legal implications, coached him on how to present the evidence without making claims he couldn't support. But there was something else Levi needed to do first. Friday afternoon, he asked Martha to show him where Eleanor was buried. The Redemption Flat Cemetery sat on a hillside overlooking the valley, dotted with weathered headstones and struggling desert plants. Eleanor's grave was in the Miller family plot, marked with a simple stone. Eleanor Miller, 24, 1991. She waited. She chose those words herself, Martha said quietly. Had them added to her stone before she died. Nobody knew what she meant. Now we do. Levi knelt by the grave, placing his hand on the sun-warmed stone. I found him, Eleanor. I found Jonas, and I found the truth. Tomorrow I'm going to tell everyone. I'm going to make sure people know you weren't just some eccentric spinster who lived alone. You were Jonas's wife, Alice's mother. You were faithful to the end. Moses had followed them to the cemetery, and now the donkey stood quietly beside Eleanor's grave, as if paying his own respects. After leaving Eleanor's grave, Levi asked Martha to show him where Jonas was buried. She led him to the eastern edge of the property, to a spot where a single cottonwood tree grew. This isn't in the official cemetery, Martha explained. Eleanor must have buried him here in secret on his own land. There's no marker, but the old folks say this is where he lies. Levi spent an hour that evening placing stones to mark the grave properly, creating a cairn that would last. He carved Jonas's name and dates into a flat rock and set it at the head of the mound. It wasn't an official gravestone, but it was acknowledgement, recognition, the beginning of bringing Jonas out of the shadows. You did everything right, Levi said to his great-grandfather's unmarked grave. You protected your family. You preserved the truth. You kept faith even when everything was taken from you. Tomorrow I'm going to honor that. I'm going to finish what you started. The cottonwood's leaves rustled in the evening breeze, and Levi chose to believe it was Jonas's way of answering. That night, Victor came to the barn one final time. He came alone, which somehow made him more threatening. His expensive truck's headlights cut through the darkness, and when he got out, his expression was cold. Last chance, Cooper. Walk away now, tonight, and I'll give you $100,000. Cash. You take it and disappear, and we forget this whole thing. No, then you're a fool. Victor's voice was harsh. You think you can win? You think some old papers and a sad story are going to make people side with you over me? I own this valley. I employ half the people in it. I've got lawyers who'll tie you up in court until you're old and broken. And if you somehow manage to win, if some miracle happens and a judge believes your story, I'll make sure that barn burns to the ground before you can claim victory. There won't be anything left for you to inherit. Get off my property. Victor stared at him for a long moment, then laughed. Your property? You really believe that, don't you? You think $15 and some fantasy about your grandfather make this yours? He turned to leave, then paused. Tomorrow, when you stand up in that town hall and make your little presentation, remember that you chose this. Whatever happens next, it's on you. After Victor's truck disappeared into the darkness, Levi sat on the barn steps with Moses beside him. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from anger and adrenaline. Victor had threatened to burn the barn, threatened to destroy the last physical evidence of Jonas's life. We'll be ready, Levi said to Moses. Whatever he does, we'll be ready. But inside, doubt gnawed at him. What if Victor was right? What if the truth wasn't enough? What if money and power won, the way they had when Samuel stole the ranch 70 years ago? Moses pressed his head against Levi's shoulder, warm and solid and faithful. Your family waited 3 generations for this moment, Levi said. I won't let you down. The stars came out brilliant in the desert darkness. Somewhere out there, Eleanor lay in her grave, and Jonas beneath his cottonwood. They'd done their part, preserved the truth at tremendous personal cost. Now it was Levi's turn to carry it forward. Tomorrow, in front of the community, he would tell their story. He would show the evidence. He would fight for justice. And whatever came after, victory or defeat, vindication or loss, at least he would have tried. At least Jonas and Eleanor would know someone had cared enough to speak for them. Sometimes that was all you could do. Stand up and tell the truth, regardless of the consequences. Tomorrow, that's exactly what Levi intended to do. The old town hall hadn't seen this many people in 20 years. Every chair was filled, and more folks stood along the walls and crowded in the doorway. Levi recognized some faces from around town, but many were strangers, people who'd driven in from surrounding areas, drawn by rumors of scandal and revelation. The air was thick with anticipation and summer heat, ceiling fans doing little to move the stale air. Victor sat in the front row with his lawyers flanking him, his expression carefully neutral but his jaw tight. Martha sat on the opposite side of the aisle, her presence a quiet rebellion against her own son. Tom Richter, Mary Chen, and Ben Morrison sat together near the middle, faces resolute. Levi stood at the front of the room, behind a small table where he'd laid out his evidence. His hands wanted to shake, but he forced them to steadiness. Ronald Pearson sat nearby, ready to handle any legal challenges, but they'd agreed Levi should tell the story himself. It was his family, his history, his fight. "Thank you all for coming," Levi began, his voice carrying across the room despite his nervousness. "My name is Levi Cooper, and I'm here to tell you about a crime that happened 70 years ago, a crime that's never been answered for, a theft that's never been made right." He started with the photographs, holding them up so people could see. Jonas as a young man, strong and honest-faced. Eleanor, beautiful and sad-eyed. Alice as a baby, as a child, as a young woman. This is Jonas Cooper. He owned the ranch that used to cover most of this valley. And this is Eleanor Miller, the woman he loved. They married in secret in 1947 and had a daughter, Alice, in 1948. Levi's voice grew stronger as he spoke. Jonas was the rightful heir to the Cooper Ranch, but his brother Samuel wanted it all. In 1950, Samuel tried to murder Jonas by pushing him into the canyon. Jonas survived, but was forced into hiding because Samuel had the law on his side and the will to finish what he'd started. He showed them the letters next, reading passages aloud. Eleanor's words about the pregnancy. Jonas's anguished writing about watching his brother steal everything. The desperate plans to keep their daughter safe. Samuel forged Jonas's signature on documents transferring the ranch. He told everyone Jonas ran away or died. He built an empire on stolen land. Levi held up the forged documents, then the copies Jonas had annotated showing the fraud. Jonas documented everything. He lived in hiding for 2 years, watching Samuel prosper on lies, until he died in 1952. Victor's lead lawyer stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Chairman." The town meeting didn't have a formal structure, but someone had been designated to moderate. "This is all very touching, but it's ancient history. The statute of limitations on any potential fraud claim expired decades ago. Even if Mr. Cooper's story is true, it has no bearing on current property rights. Samuel Cooper held that land for 17 years, sold it legally to various parties, and those transactions were all above board. Jonas didn't abandon his claim, Levi said firmly. He was driven into hiding by an attempted murder. And he left a will. He held up the document. Properly witnessed and executed, leaving everything to his daughter Alice and her descendants. "That's me. I'm Alice's grandson." A murmur ran through the crowd. Victor's face had gone white. "That's preposterous," Victor said, standing. "You can't prove any of this. These could be forgeries themselves, fabricated to support a shakedown. You're a drifter with nothing to your name, and suddenly you show up claiming to be heir to a fortune. It's transparent fraud." "I have witnesses," Levi said. He gestured to Tom Richter. Tom worked on the Cooper Ranch. He saw Samuel's men destroying evidence after Jonas disappeared. Tom stood, his old voice still strong. "I was 20 years old, working as a ranch hand. I saw them burning papers in barrels, bags, and bags of documents. When I asked what they were doing, they told me to mind my business, or I'd be looking for work elsewhere. I kept quiet because I needed the job, but I knew something wrong had happened." Mary Chen stood next. "I knew Eleanor Miller. She was a regular at my cafe for 40 years. She lived alone, never married, but every few months she'd come in looking peaceful and happy for a day or two, like she'd seen someone she loved. Now I understand. She'd been visiting Jonas in secret. Ben Morrison rose slowly, using his cane for support. I processed the property transfer papers at the county assessor's office. The signatures looked wrong, the dates didn't match up. I reported irregularities to my supervisor, but I was told to approve them anyway. The Cooper family had influence, and I was just a clerk. But I've carried that guilt for 70 years. Victor's lawyer tried to interrupt, but the moderator held up his hand. Let the man finish presenting his evidence. Levi took a breath. This was it, the moment that would either convince people or condemn him as a fraud. He reached beneath the table and pulled out something he'd found in Jonas's journal just that morning, tucked into a pocket in the back cover. A small reel-to-reel tape, the kind used in the early 1950s. Jonas made a recording, Levy said. He found an old tape recorder, probably borrowed it, and recorded his testimony. His voice, his story. In his own words, the room went absolutely silent. Levi had borrowed a tape player from Ronald Pearson, one of the old machines that could still play these ancient reels. He threaded the tape carefully, his hands steady now, and pressed play. There was static at first, crackling and hissing. Then faint but unmistakable, an old man's voice came through the speaker. My name is Jonas Cooper, and if you're hearing this, then I'm dead. I'm making this recording on May 20th, 1952, in the barn where I've been hiding for the past 2 years. The voice was rough with age and illness, but clear, determined. In the town hall, people leaned forward, straining to hear every word. My brother Samuel tried to kill me in 1950. He pushed me into the canyon because I wouldn't sign over my inheritance. I survived barely, but I couldn't go to the law. Samuel had them in his pocket, so I hid. I watched him steal everything my father built, everything that should have gone to my daughter. A woman in the back row had her hand over her mouth. Others sat frozen, listening to a dead man speak. I'm dying now. I can feel it. But I've made sure the truth will survive me. I've documented everything, the forgery, the attempted murder, the theft. I've left proof that Alice Eleanor Cooper is my daughter and Eleanor Miller's daughter, that we were legally married, that she is the rightful heir to everything Samuel has stolen. Jonas's voice grew stronger, fueled by righteous anger. If you're hearing this, then you're either my descendant or someone who cares about justice. Either way, you deserve to know. Don't let them tell you that time erases injustice. Don't let them say that because Samuel held the land for years, it became rightfully his. Theft is theft, no matter how long the thief prospers. The tape crackled, and Jonas's voice softened. Tell Eleanor I loved her to the last breath. Tell Alice, my daughter who I never got to hold, that everything I did was to keep her safe. And to whoever fights this battle in my name, thank you. Stand for what's right, even when it costs you everything. That's what being a Cooper means. The tape ended. In the silence that followed, Levi looked out at the crowd. Some people were crying. Others sat stunned. Victor had his head in his hands. That's my great-grandfather, Levi said quietly. And I'm here to finish what he started. The silence after Jonas's voice faded was profound. People sat frozen, processing what they'd heard. A ghost speaking truth across 7 decades. Levi saw tears on weathered faces, saw understanding dawn in eyes that had believed Samuel Cooper's lie all their lives. Victor stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is manipulation, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. That recording could be fake, altered. Technology exists to fake a 1952 recording on period-appropriate equipment. Ronald Pearson stood, his tone cutting. I'll have that tape examined by experts if needed, but we all know what we just heard. That was Jonas Cooper's voice, recorded before your grandfather had even finished spending his stolen fortune. Victor's lawyer tried a different approach. Even if the recording is genuine, it doesn't change the legal reality. Adverse possession laws exist for a reason. The Brennan family has held and improved that land for 70 years. We've paid taxes, maintained properties, created jobs and economic value. You can't simply undo generations of legitimate business because of one man's grievance. One man's attempted murder, Tom Richter called out from his seat. Let's call it what it was. The moderator stood. Folks, I think we need to wait. Martha Brennan rose slowly, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Everyone turned to look at her, Victor included, his expression turning wary. I have something to add to Levi's evidence. Something I've been holding for a long time, waiting for the right moment. She walked to the front of the room, pulling an envelope from her purse. 5 years before she died, Eleanor Miller came to see me. She knew I'd married into the Brennan family, knew my husband had been Samuel Cooper's business partner. She was old by then, sick, and she wanted to make sure the truth wouldn't die with her. Martha opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Eleanor gave me this and made me promise not to open it unless a Cooper came back to claim the land. She said I'd know when the time was right. She looked at Levi. That time is now. The document she pulled out was formal, typed on legal stationery with official seals and signatures. Martha handed it to Levi, but he read it aloud so everyone could hear. Testament of Eleanor Miller, witnessed and notarized, filed with the county clerk's office on April 3rd, 1985. I, Eleanor Miller, being of sound mind and body, do hereby make this sworn statement regarding the Cooper family property and the events of 1950-1952. Jonas Cooper was my husband, legally married before God and witnesses in 1947. He was the father of my daughter, Alice Eleanor Cooper, born April 2nd, 1948. Alice was not stillborn, as public records indicate. That was a protective fiction to keep her safe from those who would have used her to control. Jonas did not die in 1950. He survived an attempted murder by his brother Samuel and lived in hiding until his death from natural causes in 1952. I visited him regularly, bringing supplies and news of our daughter, who I had placed with my aunt in California for her protection. Samuel Cooper forged his brother's signature on documents transferring the Cooper ranch. I have personal knowledge of this fraud, as Jonas showed me the genuine documents and the forged ones side by side. Samuel's entire claim to the property was built on lies and attempted murder. I file this testament to be opened when Alice's descendants come forward to claim their inheritance. Everything the Brennan family has built is founded on stolen land. Let history record the truth, even if the law fails to correct it. Martha's voice broke as she finished reading. Eleanor made me her executor for this document. She trusted me to keep it safe until it was needed, and she filed it officially with the county, so there's no question of authenticity. Ronald Pearson stood immediately. I'll need to verify that filing. The county clerk, who'd been sitting quietly in the back, stood. I can confirm it. The document is in our records, filed and sealed by Eleanor Miller in 1985, with instructions that it be opened only by a direct descendant of Alice Eleanor Cooper or their legal representative. She walked to the front. I can provide certified copies right now if needed. Victor's face had gone from white to red. This is a conspiracy. You're all in on it together, trying to rob my family of what we've built, what we've earned, what you stole. Martha said quietly, but her words carried through the room. Victor, I loved your father. He was a good man in many ways. But he knew, and your grandfather Samuel knew, that everything you have came from theft and murder. I can't be part of that lie anymore. I won't be. You're my mother, and that's why I'm doing this. Because I love you enough to want you to live with truth instead of lies. Martha's eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. Eleanor waited her whole life for justice. Jonas died waiting for it. I will not go to my grave, helping to perpetuate what Samuel did. Victor's lawyers were conferring in urgent whispers. One of them approached the moderator. We need time to review this new evidence, to verify its authenticity and legal standing. We request a recess. The evidence is authentic, the county clerk repeated firmly. I'll swear to it in any court. Victor looked around the room at the faces watching him, some sympathetic, some angry, all of them waiting to see what he'd do. His empire was crumbling. The development deals, the bank loans, the investors, all of it built on land he could no longer prove he owned. "This meeting is over," Victor said suddenly. He pushed past his lawyers and strode toward the door. "Victor!" Martha called after him, but he didn't stop. Levi felt alarm spike through him. Victor was desperate now, cornered. Men did dangerous things when they felt they had nothing left to lose. He thought of Victor's threat from the previous night. "I'll make sure that barn burns to the ground." "I need to get back to the barn," Levi said to Ronald Pearson. Now, he ran from the town hall, several people calling after him. He heard vehicles starting up behind him, people following, sensing that this wasn't finished yet. But Levi's focus was on one thing, getting to the barn before Victor did something irreversible. The 3-mile walk took agonizing minutes even at a run. Levi's lungs burned, his legs ached, but he pushed harder. As he crested the last rise before the barn came into view, he saw it, Victor's truck parked by the barn, and Victor himself walking toward the structure with a red gasoline can in each hand. "No!" Levi shouted, sprinting down the slope. Moses was there too, standing between Victor and the barn door. The donkey's ears were flat back, his whole body tense with aggression. As Victor approached, Moses brayed, loud, piercing, furious, and charged. Victor stumbled backward, dropping one gas can. "Get away from me." He swung the other can at Moses, but the donkey was quick, dodging and charging again. Levi reached them, positioning himself between Victor and the barn. Behind him, he heard vehicles arriving, voices calling out. The community had followed. "It's over, Victor," Levi said, breathing hard. "Burning the barn won't change anything. The evidence is copies now, filed officially, witnessed by dozens of people. All you'll do is make it worse." "You don't understand," Victor said, and Levi was shocked to see tears on the man's face. "Everything I have, everything my father built, my grandfather, it's all gone now. The investors will pull out. The banks will call the loans. I'll lose everything. Like Jonas lost everything," Levi said quietly. "Like Eleanor lost everything. They didn't get justice in their lifetime, Victor, but that doesn't mean they didn't deserve it." Victor's hands shook. The gas can hung heavy in his grip. Moses stood ready to charge again if needed, loyal and protective to the end. Martha pushed through the arriving crowd. "Victor," she said, walking slowly toward her son. "Put it down, please. For once in your life, do the right thing." Victor looked at his mother, at Levi, at the barn where Jonas had died waiting for vindication. The fight went out of him all at once. He set down the gas can and sank to his knees in the dust, shoulders shaking with sobs. "I'm sorry," he said, broken. "God help me, I'm sorry. 6 months had changed everything and nothing." The barn still stood on its half-acre, but now it was fully restored. Roof repaired, walls reinforced, windows replaced with glass that caught the morning sun and turned it to gold. The structure looked like it had in Jonas's time, proud and functional, a testament to what careful hands and patient work could accomplish. Levi stood in the doorway, watching Moses graze contentedly in the small paddock he'd built. The donkey was healthy now, well-fed and groomed, his coat glossy in the winter light. But more than that, Moses seemed at peace. The long vigil was over. The promise kept. The legal settlement had taken months of negotiation. Victor's claims to the land had indeed crumbled under the weight of evidence. But Ronald Pearson had helped Levi understand that complete restoration of the original Cooper Ranch was neither possible nor perhaps even desirable. Too many innocent people had bought parcels in good faith over the decades. Too many lives would be upended by trying to undo 70 years of transactions. Instead, they'd reached an agreement. Levi retained the barn property and the crucial water rights that went with it. Victor's development company collapsed, but in its place, he'd started something different, a historic preservation firm that helped restore old properties throughout the valley. His first project had been funding the barn's restoration, a way of making amends. The other families who'd been cheated by Samuel Cooper over the years, and there were several, once people felt safe to speak up, received settlements funded by the sale of some of Victor's personal holdings. It wasn't full restitution, but it was acknowledgement. Recognition that wrongs had been done. More importantly, the truth was now public record. The county had installed a historical marker at the barn, telling Jonas and Eleanor's story. Their names were in the newspaper archives, in the Historical Society's records, spoken aloud again after decades of silence. Alice Eleanor Cooper's real birth certificate had been filed officially, correcting the false death certificate. The Cooper family line was restored to the historical record, legitimate and acknowledged. Martha visited often, usually bringing food and staying to talk. She and Victor were rebuilding their relationship slowly, painfully, but with honesty this time. She'd told Levi that Victor had been in therapy, working through the guilt of benefiting from his grandfather's crimes, learning to separate his own worth from his family's tainted legacy. "He asks about you sometimes," Martha said one afternoon, sitting with Levi on the barn's new porch. "Wonders if you hate him." "I don't," Levi said truthfully. "He didn't commit the original crime. He just inherited it like I inherited the need to fix it." The restored barn had become something more than just Levi's home. Young people from town came to learn traditional ranching skills, how to care for animals, repair equipment, work the land honestly. Levi taught them what his grandfather had taught him, what Jonas had known, skills that shouldn't be lost just because the world had moved on to easier things. He'd even taken in a foster child, a 13-year-old boy named Danny who'd been bouncing through the system, angry and lost. Danny was teaching Moses tricks now, spending hours with the donkey, finding in the animal's patient wisdom, something he couldn't find anywhere else. Levi watched them together and understood that this was part of Jonas's legacy too, providing refuge, offering second chances, believing in redemption. One morning in early December, Levi finished carving a new wooden sign. He'd worked on it for weeks, using tools he'd found in the barn and techniques he'd learned from an old craftsman in town. The sign was 3 feet long, the letters cut deep and filled with dark stain. Cooper Ranch restored 1976 for Jonas and Eleanor. He hung it above the barn door, stepping back to admire the work. Moses came to stand beside him, and Levi could have sworn the donkey was looking at the sign with approval. "They'd be proud," Levi said quietly. "Your ancestors did their job. They kept watch. They waited. And when I showed up with $15 and no plan, they showed me what I needed to find." Moses made a soft sound, warm breath steaming in the cold air. Levi pulled Jonas's pocket watch from his pocket. He carried it always now, kept it wound and running. The watch had been cleaned and repaired, and it kept perfect time just as it had when Jonas's father gave it to him 86 years ago. Time hadn't erased anything. It had only tested who was willing to remember. He thought about his mother, who died never knowing she was Alice Eleanor Cooper's daughter, never knowing she came from love and sacrifice instead of abandonment. He wished he could have told her, could have seen her face when she learned the truth. But maybe she knew now, wherever she was. Maybe she and Alice and Eleanor and Jonas were all together somewhere, finally at peace. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of amber and rose. In the distance, the mountains stood eternal and watchful. Closer, smoke rose from the chimney of the small house Levi was building beside the barn. Nothing fancy. Just 4 walls and a warm hearth, a place to call home. Danny came out of the barn with a bucket of grain, heading to feed Moses. The boy was smiling, something that happened more often now. He'd started calling Levi Pops last week, casual and easy, as if testing whether the word felt right. It did. "Pops, you think Moses knows this is all for his family too?" Danny asked. "Like the barn and everything?" "I think Moses knows exactly what this is," Levi said. "His family earned it same as mine did." That night, Levi sat on the porch with a blanket around his shoulders and a mug of coffee warming his hands. Moses stood in his paddock, silhouetted against the star-filled sky. The donkey looked peaceful, complete. The long duty was fulfilled. Levi thought about that day 6 months ago when he'd counted out $15 for a barn he'd never seen. He'd been at rock bottom then, broken and lost, looking for nothing more than a place to exist. But that barn, Jonas's barn, his barn, had given him everything he'd stopped believing he could have. Purpose, family, identity, home. Justice had come slowly, the way Jonas said it would. Delayed but not denied. And in the waiting, in the patient work of uncovering truth and speaking it aloud, Levi had found not just his past, but his future. He stood and walked to where Moses waited by the fence. The donkey pressed his head against Levi's chest, and Levi wrapped his arms around the animal's neck in an embrace that honored all the Moses donkeys who'd come before, all the generations who'd kept faith with the promise made so long ago. "We're home. Old friend," Levi whispered into the donkey's warm ear. "We're finally home." And standing there in the December night, with stars wheeling overhead and the restored barn standing strong behind them, Levi understood that some things were worth any price, even the price of everything, because the smallest investment made with faith and courage could yield returns that lasted generations. $15 had bought a barn, but what it really bought was truth, justice, and the chance to honor love that had endured beyond death itself. That was worth more than any fortune. That was worth everything.